So it's the middle of the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan is back on Mandalore. He has just discovered that Darth Maul is in control of the Mandalorians. In the palace, he holds Duchess Satine, Obi-Wan's love, by her throat, in the air, taunting Obi-Wan, and saying this is how he was going to get him back. He never planned on killing Obi-Wan, but he planned on torturing him, making him suffer. And with Obi-Wan there, helpless, Maul swiftly pulls in Satine, stabs her right through the heart, and there she lays, in Obi-Wan's arms, and he remembers her final words. "Remember, my dear Obi-Wan, I've loved you always." And this hits Obi-Wan right in the soul, more than any battle wound would ever hurt. These words hurt him unbelievably bad. It was like a spark that began to start an eruption inside of him. Obi-Wan had done an excellent job his whole life as a Jedi of foregoing attachments. When Qui-Gon died on Naboo, it hurt a lot, but he was ready, he was trained for it. He'd seen fellow Jedi and clones fall every day now during the Clone Wars, and he could even sense turmoil within his apprentice, the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker. He'd trained himself to let go of everyone except his love, Duchess Satine, the woman he loved. The woman he would have left the Jedi Order for just a few years ago. The woman the Jedi Code forced him to abandon. The woman that was killed in front of him. Killed by the same monster that killed his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, all those years ago. The man that had been terrorizing planets had taken over Mandalore, all for selfish ideals. Killed Satine just to get back at him. And the Jedi Code forbade Obi-Wan from killing this man, this monster that had ended the lives of his master and his love. That would end today. Without thinking of anything beyond these walls, without thinking of the consequences of his actions, Kenobi did something he'd never done before. He acted. He acted upon the raging fire inside of him that had been building up over since Naboo, and in a burst of anger, he sent an exploding wave of the Force through the room, killing the Mandalorian guards, the soldiers, and knocking Savage Opress unconscious, as Maul also flew back, hit the wall, but stayed conscious. A bit shocked, but laughing now, Maul said, "Finally, I've corrupted the great Obi-Wan Kenobi. I sense the dark side in you growing faster than I'd ever dreamed." Again, Maul said, laughing. Obi-Wan, now feeling nothing but anger, aggression, giving in to the dark side to finally destroy Darth Maul. But in all of that, deep down, he had a sense of calmness that was happy, and finally, he thought, this is happening. Finally, he was free. Finally, he was able to do what he's wanted to do since the death of Qui-Gon. To Maul, Obi-Wan said, "I hope it was worth it, as now your experience will be the same as mine." And in one swift, decisive motion, Kenobi lifted a now barely conscious Savage, and at the same time, he pulled the darksaber from a distracted Maul, and as he pulled Savage in, he stabbed him the same way Satine had died, this time in front of Maul. The same way Maul had stabbed Satine, Kenobi now did it to Savage to get revenge immediately. Kenobi threw his body back at Maul, then charged him with a fury in his eyes, making his eyes seem almost red or yellow. As Kenobi charged Maul, he had the darksaber in one hand, and he pulled his own blue saber off of the dead guard to wield both sabers. Darth Maul, in a state of shock and confusion, used his dark rage to barely block Kenobi's first strike at him, and he leapt to the door of the throne room, running into the open area where Maul and Palpatine had fought in the Clone Wars. This time, it would be a different duel. This time, Maul thought he would get the upper hand if this happened to Kenobi, but Kenobi caught him completely off guard in this fit of rage. And as this battle begins, it sends ripples through the Force, throughout the galaxy. The two people who would feel this ripple the most were Palpatine and Anakin, similar to what Palpatine felt in the Clone Wars, but this was different. The seemingly uncorruptible Obi-Wan Kenobi had turned to the dark side, and Palpatine had felt it. Palpatine knew what had happened. On Mandalore, his former apprentice, and perhaps his new one, in a wild turn of events, were fighting to the death. Palpatine had not predicted this. He thought he was going to foresee the entire Clone Wars, but this single turn of events shocked him. "Ready my ship immediately," Palpatine told Mas Amedda. Then, on the other side of Coruscant, in his chambers, Anakin was sleeping with Padme when he suddenly was awoken. A horrible dream, no, a vision, or a feeling, had awoken Anakin in his sleep. This was much more real than he'd have before, much more real than the nightmares that were to come of Padme dying. These seemed like something that had just happened. He couldn't quite make it out. He wasn't as strong as Palpatine to determine exactly what had happened, but he knew his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, was in trouble while on his mission in Mandalore. He knew something had gone wrong. He had no idea how bad it truly was. "I'm sorry, Padme, but Obi-Wan is in trouble. I'm leaving immediately for Mandalore," he said to Padme. "Let me come with you. Kenobi is my friend too," she said, and Anakin swiftly denied her, said, "I can't. This is far more dangerous than I already know," and without looking back, got into his Jedi fighter, flew away from Coruscant, and on that, him and Palpatine were on the same timeline to reach the planet and find Obi-Wan, if he was still alive. Back on Mandalore now, Kenobi jumped to take on Maul, still acting on deafening rage and dark determination to destroy Maul once and for all. This monster had taken everything from him, and it was only a matter of time, Kenobi knew, until he just infiltrated the Jedi, infiltrated Anakin, kept getting to him. Kenobi had to end this now, even though he'd been taught otherwise his entire life. He could not keep acting like this. He could not keep this up. Now, he engaged Darth Maul, and the two dark side users fought in an extremely fast-paced clash, the dark side energy between them only growing, except the energy was not the same. Kenobi was only getting angrier, while Maul was only getting more fearful. This battle was not as even as Maul had hoped. Kenobi was using his Form 3 defensive style, of course, which Maul had been ready for. But Maul underestimated the dark side influence on this form, and the double saber-wielding form that Kenobi was now using. With this form, Kenobi wasn't losing an ounce of energy, using excellent timing for offensive strikes, and perfectly timing his defense on Maul. This was wearing Maul down. He was getting frustrated. He was getting angrier, more fearful, not sure of how to defeat Kenobi after finally executing his plan of getting to corrupt him. Maul had done it, but at what cost? And after many hard-fought minutes, both warriors really knew this was no longer a fair fight. Kenobi, using both his blue saber and the dark saber, was merely toying with Maul as the fight waned on. Kenobi wanted Maul to feel this. Kenobi wanted Maul to know he was going to lose. Kenobi was torturing him. Kenobi was in the dark side now. "You've been nothing but a nagging thorn in my side since our first encounter on Naboo," Kenobi told Maul. And then, finally, Maul crumbled to a knee, holding his lightsaber up in a final act of desperation, and Kenobi cut it off with the dark saber. Then he held his blue saber and the dark saber across Maul's neck like Anakin did to Dooku in Revenge of the Sith. "Please have mercy. Perhaps after all this, it's our destiny to join each other and take over the galaxy," begged Maul. "I do thank you for revealing my destiny, Maul. Unfortunately for you, this is where our path together ends, at my hand and with your sabers." Kenobi threw away his blue saber and pulled in Maul's red one. He then killed Darth Maul. This act pulled Kenobi further into the dark side. He had completely changed in a matter of just an hour or so. Satine killed, and his whole world had exploded. He looked down at the red saber, and back to his former blue saber, and as a token for his turn to the dark side, he destroyed his blue saber, hooked Maul's red saber to his belt as his new one. This was who he was now. There was no turning back. There was no coming back. There was no redeeming at this point. Kenobi knew that. Kenobi knew how powerful he became. He had killed Maul and let the dark side overcome him, and for the first time since any of this had happened, a wave of grief, sorrow, anger, and fear surrounded him. What have I done? He asked himself, knowing he could never truly go back to who he was. He knew that. He knew this is not what Qui-Gon would have wanted. This is not Satine would have wanted, but this was where he was now. He was confined by the dark side, but freed of the light, freed of the confines of the Jedi that had let Qui-Gon die, the Jedi that would only act when the Senate allowed, rather than what the Force wanted, and therefore had sent him alone to Mandalore. He was free to bring peace back to the galaxy. But how? He cannot do this alone. He'd been meditating on these thoughts now for hours in the palace and the throne room, wondering what will his next move be after his world had crumbled upon himself and he had finally freed himself of the Jedi's shackles. Wondering what was next. After meditating for hours, destruction surrounding him and Mandalore in disarray, he was finally pulled out of the meditation by sensing a presence. Anakin, he gasped. But no, this was something different. Something dark. Darker than he'd ever felt. Sidious, Kenobi now gasped. No, both, Kenobi sensed. The Lord of the Sith and the most powerful Jedi Obi-Wan had ever known. In other words, two potential allies, but at least one potential enemy. The two ships landed away from one another, each one carrying a member of the most important moment of the war. This is what it would come down to. Kenobi, Anakin, Sidious, all in the same palace. As Anakin landed, he told R2, "Kenobi is here, but something is off. I sense only remnants of him, clouded by the dark side. I've felt this presence, or presences, since we arrived on the planet. Be ready to take off. I'll be right back." And Anakin strode into the palace and into the throne room now. He looked around, glass bodies scattered around the room. And finally he looked up to the throne. Obi-Wan across the room, sitting there. But it wasn't the typical Obi-Wan that Anakin knew and loved. Something felt off. His presence. He felt like a completely different person. Something had happened. "Obi-Wan, are you all right?" said Anakin before his eyes caught a glimpse of a new body. Anakin gasped. "Satine." "She's gone, Anakin. Killed by Maul." "Maul? Did he escape?" said Anakin, shocked. "No, Anakin. I killed him. I did what had to be done to free the galaxy of that evil. I killed him, and in doing so, I freed myself from the blinding constraints of the Jedi. If I had done this sooner, Anakin, the woman I loved wouldn't have died because of Maul and because of me. Anakin, I know you understand. You must join." And suddenly the sound of two lightsabers igniting across the room caught the attention of both Kenobi and Skywalker. The hue of two red lightsabers illuminated the room. "Sidious," said Kenobi, igniting his new saber, along with the dark saber. "I knew I sensed an evil around here. Kenobi, this path of yours was unforeseen, even to me. I cannot let you destroy everything I've built. I give you one chance to join me against the Jedi, or die," Palpatine said, but he sensed how powerful Kenobi had become, and he could not let Skywalker and Kenobi join against him. That would ultimately be his demise if the Chosen One and his master joined together as one, embracing the dark side. Palpatine knew this, knowing he likely had to kill Kenobi. And Kenobi, during all this, had become much stronger in the Force, much stronger in the dark side. And while much older than Skywalker, this was an opportunity for Palpatine that the Force had put in the palm of his hand. Apprentice? Maybe. But probably having to kill one or both. Anakin now, seeing this, would not know what to do. And finally, after a moment of silence, Obi-Wan spoke towards Anakin, who was trying to process everything going on. Anakin, who had just arrived, of course, was now seeing his master engulfed by the dark side, and a mysterious figure, the mysterious Sith Lord. And Anakin recognized his voice, but refused to acknowledge just what he thought it was to this point. Obi-Wan said to him, "Anakin, I know you understand what I have done. The Force has brought us to this very moment. You, the Chosen One, and I can destroy the Sith and end the war. Bring peace. Do not listen to him, my boy. And perhaps an event even more shocking than Obi-Wan's turn. The Sith had interrupted Obi-Wan, and has now removed his hood, revealing himself to be Chancellor Palpatine. Anakin, shocked, says, "What? This can't be." Rage and confusion boiling inside of Anakin. As it had been for years, this was just the beginning of what looked to be possibly a three-way battle, until Kenobi spoke up again. "Only together can we protect Padme from the same fate I failed to protect Satine from. Join me, Anakin, and save your wife." Now this put a wrench in the entire standoff. Palpatine was almost as shocked as Anakin as that move. Anakin did not know that Obi-Wan knew this, but Obi-Wan, of course, secretly knew about this marriage between Anakin and Padme, and now understood. With the death of Satine, he got it. He knew if something happened to Padme, Anakin would fall down this same exact path. She meant everything to him, and Obi-Wan needed to use that. Palpatine, though, super shocked by this. That was his plan. He was going to lure Anakin by bringing Padme into it. Obi-Wan just kept getting in his way, kept ruining his plans, and no longer would that be the case. Palpatine put away his sabers, brought his hands up, fired a blast of lightning seemingly 10 times what Kenobi experienced from Dooku back on Geonosis at the beginning of the Clone Wars. Kenobi instinctively, of course, put his sabers up, but stumbled back, and Palpatine approached him, clearly with the upper hand, his mind focused solely on ending Kenobi, who just kept interfering with his plans for Anakin. He would not allow this to continue. And as Palpatine was ready to increase his lightning, fully engulfed in the dark side, he was ready to kill Kenobi with a strike, blowing him backwards. A new blade came up from behind him and slashed his right arm just before Palpatine sensed it. Palpatine was lucky that this was not a fatal blow, as he had been solely focused on Kenobi, but in the last second, he had sensed Anakin, and he had leaped away. Anakin, he realized, had embraced the dark side. He'd given in to his rage that was boiling inside of him for the entire war. He'd given in after the Sand People, after many scary moments with Padme, after his master turned to the dark side. Anakin has embraced it, but also Palpatine worried he was embracing his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, not Palpatine. And as Palpatine looked on from a distance, the two former Jedi got together, master and apprentice, embracing the dark side together as one. Obi-Wan turned to him, his apprentice now joining him. "I have taught you the light and done my best to keep you from the dark for your whole time as a Jedi, Anakin. We both know the turmoil, anger, and fear inside of you. Let it out, my young apprentice, and together, we can destroy the Sith. We can end this war, and you can protect Padme." "Yes, my master, together," said Anakin, and the two of them linked up together, knowing this was their destiny, moved on Palpatine, who called upon all the dark side energy to help heal or numb his arm so he could fight the formidable duo. He fired a bolt of lightning, and it was not of much effect. The two blocked it, and Palpatine, frustrated, angry, told them, "It is my destiny to rule this galaxy. I will not let two pathetic Jedi get in my way." And as the battle ensued, the two former Jedi fought together side by side. For many years, with only the light side as their ally, this duo had been formidable. But now, with the light side mastered and the dark side influence now let in, this duo was seemingly unstoppable. They fought off of each other, perfectly matching one another, as Palpatine fought desperately to fend them off. But as the battle continued, the three knew this was the will of the Force, and finally, the two former Jedi were following the Force rather than following the Senate. This was their destiny, and Anakin, angry with Palpatine for pretending to be his mentor, pretending to be the Chancellor, never letting him in on this secret of his, cut through his knee in the final blow, and as he dropped, Obi-Wan stabbed him through the back with his new red saber. Palpatine fired a final, desperate, pathetic blast of lightning at Anakin, catching him a little off guard, but not before Kenobi drew his saber out through his back, cutting him down finally. Anakin was a little injured, but very much alive. In the end, Obi-Wan approached him. "You have done well, my apprentice. Together, this war can be ended swiftly, and we can bring peace. No more waiting on a corrupted Senate. If we kill Dooku, we can convince the remaining Jedi and clones to stand down. Padme can take control of the Senate, and we will maintain peace," Obi-Wan told Anakin. Anakin responded finally, "We will kill Dooku, my master, and any Jedi who dares to stand in our way, and we will lead with Padme as the new leader of the Senate." The two fallen Jedi walked back to their ships, Anakin back to R2 and Obi-Wan back to the Twilight. Not long ago, the two had just landed on Mandalore as Jedi, leaders of the Republic, but now things were different. They left no longer as Jedi, but not quite as Sith either. Instead, in their minds at least, they were truly just keepers of the peace. Not as the Jedi referred to the term of keepers of the peace, but rather the new, effective way, the way that would truly bring peace. Both of the fallen Jedi were still in a state of shock, but they knew what had to be done. Dooku had to be taken out before he truly realized what happened. "Anakin, set course for Sereno. We're taking the fight directly to Dooku, and we will end this war swiftly." "Yes, Master. And what about Ventress, Grievous, and the Jedi?" "In due time, Anakin. The pathetic droid Grievous and the assassin Ventress will scatter without Dooku and Sidious remaining. I do sense your hatred growing strong at the thought of that traitor Palpatine. He used you throughout the war, Anakin. He got what he deserved, as will the others. Embrace the hatred for now, but do not let it destroy you, Anakin. Use it to your advantage. Do not let it overcome you." "Yes, Master. I'm trying. I am. We will go to Sereno, and Dooku will not know what hit him." "I will see you soon," Obi-Wan said. "One more thing, Master," Anakin asked him. "Would Qui-Gon have truly wanted this?" Obi-Wan responded, "He would have wanted us to follow the will of the Force, and I believe that is what we are doing. He was taught by his master. His master, of course, was Dooku. He was taught to follow the will of the Force, something I'd never truly understood, but now I do." Anakin responded, "I agree, Master. To Sereno, but to seize control of the galaxy. We cannot do this alone. Ahsoka, our clone legions perhaps. In due time, Anakin. In due time." Across the galaxy now, Yoda is in deep meditation in the council chambers as Mace Windu walks in, looking severely troubled. "Master Yoda, I've sensed a great disturbance in the Force. The cloud of the Sith seems to have been severely weakened. Have you sensed anything?" "Right you were about the boy, and right I was about his master. Train him he could not. Fallen the Chosen One has, and fallen with him Kenobi has. On Mandalore they were, and confronted by Sidious it seems they were. The cloud of the Sith is falling, and a new threat is rapidly approaching." The both of them sat in silence for what seemed like forever. They knew Kenobi had gone to Mandalore, but they did not know what would ensue after. "Then our worst fears have been realized," Windu said. "The boy was not to be trusted. Where is Ahsoka, his Padawan, and the clone legions that they led? We must get to them before the fallen Jedi. That will be their next move." "On our side, time is," said Yoda. "To kill Dooku, the fallen Jedi are going. Makes sense, it does. Gather the council along with Skywalker's Padawan, we must, before it is too late." Back on Sereno now, with the two fallen Jedi, Count Dooku meditates in his castle. For what felt like the first time in forever, he felt peace of not being in a battle. He was home, waiting for an update on Sidious's mission on Mandalore, taking out the rogue Maul. But the peace, it extended further than just not being in a battle. It was like a weight was lifted off his shoulders, and he was free. It was almost as if, no, Palpatine was headed to Mandalore to confront Maul. Something could not have gone wrong. Palpatine predicted everything. He knew everything. But something was off, and suddenly a droid warbled to Dooku. "Sir, 2 starfighters are rapidly approaching, both ships belonging to Anakin Skywalker," Dooku sensed. "Ah, the Master and the Apprentice going against the Republic, going against everything the Republic would have wanted to kill me, here and now." Those short-sighted Jedi fools will have one final lesson then. Let them in once they arrive. We will be unable to stop them until they get in here. Do not give them trouble. Allow them to get up here, and I will take care of him. Dooku told the droid as he stood, poised in his room. This could be the end of the war. Wherever Palpatine was, this was Dooku's chance to prove himself. Maybe even kill Kenobi, and turn Skywalker, as he knew his master wanted in the end. As the Jedi landed and entered the castle, Dooku was searching for their feelings and emotions through the Force. He sensed adrenaline and something else. Hatred. This couldn't be the duo he fought back on Geonosis at the start of the war. Something had changed. Something had gone wrong. Dooku started to feel fear creeping up into his own mind. Could it be possible? Could Kenobi have turned? The man who would not turn on Geonosis when Dooku had admitted everything to him. This is impossible. If Skywalker and Kenobi were embracing the dark side, his master would no longer have any use for him. Dooku knew he had to kill both of them. Anakin and Obi-Wan ran up the stairs of Castle Sereno, heading straight for Dooku without any hesitation or any resistance whatsoever. The plan was simple: find Dooku and take him together this time. And when they finally reached the door, Anakin was trembling with hatred. Obi-Wan, still deep in the dark side, felt similar, but Anakin was erratic as a Jedi and was now a ticking time bomb, about to face the man who took his hand before the war. Obi-Wan could feel this. It was unlike anything he'd ever felt. The raw power, untamed, untrained, but power was just surrounding Anakin. There was not much he could do. Obi-Wan feared him at this point, and with one giant two-handed push, Anakin blew the door off its hinges and sent it straight at Dooku. Dooku ducked right in time as the door flew through the window behind him. Dooku stared at the door, fear in his eyes. He knew the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker, had turned. His master had told him a controlled, dark side Anakin could be their most powerful ally. But an uncontrolled, opponent, dark side Anakin, this would surely be his undoing. He had one choice. He had to try to reason with the fallen Jedi. "Stop," Dooku yelled. "I sense the darkness in you both. But Skywalker, it's going to rip you apart unless you learn to tame it, even a little bit. Only my master and I can help you." Anakin ignited a red lightsaber. Palpatine's lightsaber, Dooku sensed. "What, master?" Anakin said, and in that moment, Dooku knew. Something had gone horribly wrong. His master had actually failed. The unbeatable Darth Sidious had failed. He'd lost to the Jedi his grand plan centered around. The Sith had lost, but this didn't have to be the end for Dooku. Trying once again. "Wait, you need me," he said. "You clearly intend to end this war. The Jedi cannot help you. They are far too corrupted. You have no army, no allies, no hope of taking over if you kill me. I, like you both, am a former Jedi who saw through their dogmatic ways. Only together, as a trio, perfectly balanced in the Force, can we win this war," Dooku said, feeling his own strength growing, as this was an opportunity he didn't know he was waiting for. Together, he, the Chosen One, and the Jedi trained by his own apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, could balance the Force and bring peace. They could follow the Force, do what was meant to be done, follow the Chosen One prophecy, make things right. The Master and the apprentice, Obi-Wan and Anakin, stood, listening to him. Obi-Wan seemed to hear and be genuinely considering this. Though he fell to the dark side, he had time to gather his thoughts on the ride over. He had at least calmed himself down, realized what he had done, and while continuing to embrace the dark side, he knew this was who he was now, but he was no fool. Dooku didn't need to be a separatist. All he truly wanted was to bring peace, and he had access to the resources needing to win this war. Anakin, on the other hand, was hearing Dooku, but he was not listening. Filled with rage, looking down at his robotic hand, holding the saber of Palpatine, he lifted his good hand and fired a strong bolt of lightning at Dooku, something he'd never done before, something he never imagined he'd do. But as he did it, he knew this was right. "I hate you," he screamed, thinking only of the pain and suffering and time away from his wife Dooku had brought him. Dooku blocked the lightning but barely saw the red lightsaber headed straight for his head that Anakin had thrown, and Dooku moved at the last second but not before it cut across his right eye. Anakin pulled the saber back, leaping at Dooku, and barely a yard away to slashing and killing him before he was stopped in midair, being held up in the Force. "We need him, Anakin," screamed Obi-Wan. "Think about Padme, think about your wife, think about our goals." Anakin, hearing none of this, just a blind, bloody rage, yelled, "I don't care," the dark side growing inside of him, and the light fading. "I can take the whole council down myself, they're weak." "Don't be foolish, Anakin," Obi-Wan said. "This will not get us anywhere." But suddenly Anakin used a force pulse that broke him loose from Obi-Wan's grip and sent him flying backwards. Dooku was now back on his feet, one eye completely useless, and Anakin charged him, and a duel ensued. The two red blades clashed as Obi-Wan stood back watching. Anakin was out of control. Obi-Wan knew this, and he knew it was up to the real Sith Lord to settle him down. Dooku perhaps could take him. Dooku perhaps could show him that he had much to learn. Dooku could show him that he was not in control. And Dooku had never felt such rage and power, even with Palpatine. The potential, if controlled, was unmatched. But Dooku had a plan, knowing that Anakin was not ready at this point. While fighting, Dooku started talking to him. "Become my ally, or your wife will die." He knew this wouldn't help bring Anakin to his side right now, but it would make him more vulnerable in this fight. And as the duel continued to ensue, Dooku, the master swordsman, going up against an enraged Anakin with power that was hard to counter. Dooku continued to taunt Anakin until Anakin finally made a mistake in his blind rage, and when Dooku saw the opening, he fired the strongest burst of lightning he could manage at Anakin, sending him to the ground. "This is how the Sith teach each other," Dooku told him. "Now you understand. You are not ready," continuing to fire lightning at him. "Become my ally, and together, I will teach you to control your power. Only then will you reach your true potential," Dooku said. Obi-Wan walked behind him now, and while hurting for Anakin, he knew this was the only way. "He's right, Anakin," Obi-Wan said. "Yield and we will become a more powerful trio than anyone who dares oppose us." Anakin, continuing to writhe in pain as Dooku continued to strike him, was now beginning to listen. This was what Anakin needed. A true Sith tough lesson. This was the way of the dark side, and finally Anakin yelled, "Stop! I will join you." Out of breath, Dooku ceased his lightning. Anakin's clothes and skin was burned, and he was beginning to scar, some of the skin as red as his eyes. "Teach me how to reach my full potential," he said, barely being able to get up at this point. And for the next several days in Castle Sereno, the trio worked, trained, planned together. In this time, Dooku had cleaned up some loose ends. He had Grievous and a large battalion of droids go find Ventress and kill Ventress. And then he had summoned an oblivious Grievous to the castle, telling him the war was nearing an end. As Grievous made his way over, the trio of fallen Jedi were about ready to move on Coruscant. The Separatists were completely scattered. Grievous was about to be destroyed. The three seemingly had no army. But Dooku had told Anakin and Obi-Wan about a special order placed inside the clones' brains during their creation. Order 66. As they prepared to leave, Grievous entered the castle chambers, shocked. "Jedi scum," he exclaimed, and Obi-Wan immediately pulled him into the air, and Anakin crushed his respiratory system, and Obi-Wan threw his suddenly lifeless body out the window. "I always hated that machine," Dooku exclaimed as the three got into Dooku's ship and took off to Coruscant. Grievous was no match for them, and this was just their way of showing to themselves they could take down anyone. "Sense them, I do," Yoda said darkly to the council back on Coruscant. The trio had entered the atmosphere. They'd left Sereno and had now entered the atmosphere on Coruscant. Kenobi, Skywalker, and Dooku arrived, they have. Over the last few days, as the trio of fallen Jedi were training and preparing for this, the Jedi and Senate had been monitoring the Separatists beginning to scatter and fall apart. This didn't make much sense. The Jedi did not understand. Grievous and Ventress were MIA, and the droids had been basically shut down. The Senate was reeling from the disappearance of Chancellor Palpatine. Yoda and Mace Windu had to step in. They told them, in an emergency meeting, Windu and Yoda told the Senate that Palpatine was killed in an assassination by Count Dooku. Yoda had been meditating a lot after the death of Sidious had been revealed to him, and it was revealed that Sidious was Palpatine the whole time. Once the shroud of the dark side had faded, Yoda's vision and his Jedi senses became much clearer, and he was able to figure this out. But the Senate was not ready to hear that yet. The Senate needed to hate Dooku. They needed to be against Dooku. The Jedi were falling apart in their ideals as well, panicking a bit, as Yoda, Windu, and a few select others knew the danger that was approaching. But in the meantime, the Senate had employed Padme Amidala, Bail Organa, and Mas Amedda to lead emergency meetings to discuss what was next. The Senate had no idea about the conflict that was about to ensue in the temple. The Jedi, on the other hand, were ready. As the trio of Skywalker, Kenobi, and Dooku had landed, the full power of the dark side at their disposal, along with the element of surprise with the clone troopers, this was set to be a massacre. The three Jedi reached the stairs to the temple. Clones were nearly covering the entire staircase. This was the 501st, and the four Jedi stood at the bottom: Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Aayla Secura, and Shaak Ti. As Plo spoke to them, "It is not too late. The Separatists have fled. Surrender now, and the Republic will see to it you are free." They didn't truly know what had happened to Kenobi and Skywalker, how far they had fallen, and how far they were willing and needing to take this to end the war. Plo and the other Jedi started to feel a strange uneasiness as the fallen trio in front of them didn't waver in their dark confidence. Anakin handed Dooku a comlink with a direct channel to the 501st Legion, covering the stairs. Dooku calmly said, "Execute Order 66. And without hesitation, the four Jedi, shocking, were gunned down by gunfire all around them. Four of the most powerful Jedi Masters easily taken out, but hundreds more were in the temple. But the three fallen Jedi, along with this clone legion, was a sheer power the temple was not ready to face. As the 501st charged into the temple, now completely on the other side of the battle, Dooku, Anakin, and Obi-Wan were their allies. The Jedi were their enemies. The 501st in the temple, taking on the Jedi. Over their time in Sereno, the trio had convinced themselves that the Jedi would only stand in their way, and the only way to bring peace was to truly balance the Force. Three protectors, perfectly balanced: Anakin, Obi-Wan, Dooku. Nothing more, nothing less. The trio knew the clones could largely handle the Jedi throughout the temple, but something was off. Where were Yoda, Windu, and Ahsoka? Those three should have been on the front lines. But the trio knew. They had to be in the council chambers, waiting just for them, knowing what was going to ensue and knowing the true battle would take place in the chambers. As the trio made their way through the Jedi temple here, this was a massacre unlike anything they'd imagined. Clones taking out Jedi, Jedi cutting down clones, but not nearly enough, and any time a Jedi jumped in their way trying to stop them from getting to the council, or just got in their way on accident, the trio would easily cut down the Jedi. Former friends, former masters, apprentices, anyone that got in their way. The Jedi, the fallen Jedi, now knew this was their destiny. They were following nothing but the Force. They were ready. They walked swiftly through the temple, cutting down any Jedi, begging for mercy. Kenobi and Skywalker only used these emotions to fuel their dark minds. They had mentally prepared themselves for this massacre, anything to bring peace and to rule how they saw fit. This was so far from the Jedi that had just left not long ago. Kenobi and Skywalker, the duo that was to bring peace for the Jedi Order, was now ending it to bring peace. The fallen Jedi finally reached the council chambers. They walked in, closed the door behind them, not wanting this upcoming battle to be disturbed. This would decide the fate of the galaxy. 3 versus 3. Kenobi, Skywalker, Dooku, Yoda, Windu, Ahsoka. But the first thing anyone heard was a lightsaber igniting and a final gasp of air coming from someone's mouth. Immediately after entering the room, Anakin had stabbed Dooku from behind. "Thank you for getting us in here. Your use has come to an end, Dooku." And Dooku fell to the floor, dying instantly. "Outstanding work, Anakin," Kenobi said. "You held your anger until the perfect time to use it. His teachings will prove useful, but he was no longer of any use to us." The 2 fallen Jedi now turned to the 3 Jedi, who looked on in disbelief. Yoda and Mace were fully prepared for a fight, but they did not expect this. They knew the power and corruption the dark side had on the 2. They knew there was no turning back. Ahsoka, on the other hand, was not so ready. "What happened to you, Master? Please, this isn't you," she exclaimed. And she was right. This was not her master. This was Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. "I am here to bring balance to the Force," he exclaimed as he lifted her, choking Ahsoka, and that's when it immediately began. As Ahsoka was lifted into the air, Mace and Yoda, in a blur of purple and green, moved to the fallen Jedi, lightsabers ignited. Ahsoka fell to the ground, fainting. Anakin did not have time to even end her as the Jedi approached. Perhaps there was a bit of light in Anakin that did not allow him to end Ahsoka. Perhaps he didn't have time. He wasn't really sure. But as the battle began, he felt power running through him. As much as he loved Ahsoka during the Clone Wars, he had opposite feelings for the rest of the council. Mace Windu had never treated him right. He had never trusted him since he'd arrived here. And Yoda telling him he had only to let go of his wife, only to just learn how to let go, that was unacceptable. And Anakin, enraged, knew this would be the final battle, knew he would come out on top. Kenobi was like an emotionless machine out there, going strike for strike with Windu and Yoda. It was unexpected. Mace and Yoda had known he was powerful, but Kenobi had been holding back all these years, holding back this dark energy building inside of him, completely cutting it off. But once Kenobi let go like this, he was completely dangerous. But the two dark fallen Jedi had underestimated exactly how powerful Windu and Yoda were with their determination. Windu seemed powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with someone like even Darth Sidious, Yoda as well. The two of them, again a blur of purple and green, were going strike for strike with master and apprentice Anakin and Obi-Wan. And as the battle ensued, the two true Jedi got an upper hand. Mace cut Obi-Wan's arm, holding his lightsaber. He cut it off and then swiped at both legs. Obi-Wan had fallen. Both legs cut off. His arm cut off. He fell to the ground, writhing in pain. This had been unexpected. This was not what Anakin needed. At least that's what Anakin thought. He could not believe what he saw. His master, the one that had convinced him to take over the galaxy with him, had fallen. He could not believe it. Enraged, Anakin grabbed Yoda in midair. He was completely focused now, focused on winning this battle. This was exactly what he needed, as little as he wanted to admit it. Obi-Wan going down gave him the clarity he needed, and as Yoda jumped at him, Anakin grabbed him and shot Force lightning right through him. Yoda was done. He fell to the ground, lifeless. Then Anakin lifted Ahsoka's lightsaber, Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and Yoda's lightsaber into the air, hurling them at Windu. Windu blocked one, but the other two went right into one of his shoulders and one of his knees. Windu fell to the ground, and while he was on his knees, Anakin lifted him up, helpless, throwing him across the room, side to side, hitting him with a final lightning blast, and tossing his lifeless body out of the council window. This was the end. Anakin had won. Kenobi alive, but writhing in pain. Anakin had to save him, but the temple was now cleared out after this long battle that had seemed to go by in a flash. Ahsoka taken prisoner, hidden away, and Anakin brought Obi-Wan to a secure medical facility on Coruscant. They'd won, but at what cost? How was he to keep Obi-Wan alive? How? How was he going to prepare for this? As he searched medical facilities across Coruscant that he knew Palpatine had access to, he found designs to a giant robotic cyborg suit, and Anakin thought, this may be the only way. All of Anakin knew he had to keep Kenobi alive, and this would be the way, turning him into some sort of robot. He had the surgery set up, and then he went off to find his wife. All of Anakin was destroyed, except for one part, the part of him that lived and died only for his wife, Padme. He had gone after her after putting Kenobi on the surgery table and letting the droids do the procedure that was set to take days. And while that was going on, Ahsoka was hidden away. Anakin had found Padme, and he began explaining everything to her from his own point of view. It was the Jedi who killed Palpatine. They were planning to take over, Padme. You have to believe me. Obi-Wan and I found out, and we had no choice. We recruited the clones, and we did what we had to do. None of them survived. I had to do things I'm not proud of, but I had to protect this democracy. I had to protect you. I had to protect this republic. The Jedi were planning to take over, take it all for themselves. Now, this was different for Padme than what we saw in Revenge of the Sith. This was different because she realized Obi-Wan went along with it. She was fully convinced Kenobi would never go along with a truly evil plot. If what Anakin was saying was true, then Kenobi must have gone with, and she just had to believe him, knowing Kenobi could never be corrupted, could never go against the Jedi. Padme was inspired because of this. Eventually, she agreed with Anakin, agreeing this was right, agreeing the Jedi had to go, and agreeing that it was time for her to take over. She was eventually voted in as Chancellor with help from Anakin with some influence to the Senate. And now back in a medical room on Coruscant, Anakin had reappeared, watching as Kenobi was lifted up. He was more machine now than man, but still the same man that Anakin had just taken over the galaxy with. Rise, my master. We've succeeded. The Senate is under our influence, and Padme is leading them, just as the Force told us would happen. Obi-Wan rising, a now metallic, robotic voice seeming to take over. He'd been cut, his legs cut off, his arm cut off, and his body helpless, but Anakin was able to restore it. He was not the same, but he still rose. Good, Anakin, good. But I sense there is more you're not telling me. Anakin, hesitating, but finally admitting it, said, "Yes, Master. Padme, she's pregnant with twins."